The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Last week, one of tonight's guests told me, and I want you to think about this, the incidence of autism in 1987 were 2 in 10,000 children. But now in 2018, it's 1 in 59 children. Take a moment to think about that for a second. While we will talk a bit tonight about why that might be, more importantly, those children and their parents need support and care. This fall, a charter school that has been in Harlem and had another facility in the South Bronx is opening up a spacious new facility on Tinton Avenue, and it is custom designed for autistic children. And we're going to use that development to launch a dialogue tonight about the nature of autism, how hard parents have to work to keep their autistic children healthy and happy, and also we'll try to define what roles schools can and should play in supporting autistic children's development. So please join me in welcoming the executive director of the aforementioned school, the New York City Autism Charter School in the Bronx. It's Julie Fisher. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
And also a former special ed coordinator from the DOE who now runs the Bright Beginnings Daycare in the Bronx. It is Alicelda. Tracy. Ms. Tracy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we'll start with you, Ms. Fisher.
Sure.
Let's start with the school. I mean, I want to get into how we got there, who the children are, but just talk to me, because I know you're excited, and you know I visited the other day. What's exciting about this school? What's exciting about this moment, not only for you and the school, but for the children who have autism in the Bronx?
Yeah, well, we're a very unique program and very focused on individual students and their specific needs, and are really geared for children that are on the more profoundly affected end of the autism spectrum, because, you know, it is a spectrum disorder. So, and I think when we opened in East Harlem in 2005, we saw that our wait list was very much skewed to Bronx families. Always have had a high percentage of families on our wait list from the Bronx. And when we looked at replicating our school, we thought this is the logical place to do it. So I feel so great that we're able to bring this kind of individualized support to families living here in the Bronx where we know the need is so great.
Well, what's the difference between what you are offering and again, we don't want to talk down anybody else's facilities because we need all of those facilities. But what are you doing to specialize this so that it's really customized for those children and their families?
Yeah, and again, I think it's about options. So we are providing options to families of children that are severely affected where the needs and challenges are just great and span across all different areas. So we have children who may only eat one food. They may not be able to sleep at night. They may have challenging behavior like self-injury or aggression. They may not be able to tolerate going to the doctor or getting a haircut. So many aspects of life can become very challenging. And I think, you know, what education for those kids should look like is really addressing those areas, which goes beyond what you normally think of as happening in a school setting.
I think all schools need to do this no matter what children they are dealing with. But I think it's even more important in a school with autistic children that parents are involved in, because my heart goes to them. Sympathy, empathy, I don't know what the word is, but I see parents who have autistic children and they love and they care so much and they want so badly for their children to do as well as possible. What kinds of supports or involvement will parents have in this school?
Well, we really prioritize family engagement. You know, I always say autism doesn't stop at 2:45 when our students dismiss. And parents are really dealing with a lot of challenges outside of the school environment that they just need help with. So we really make a point of having parents come in. We have an open door policy. We have monthly meetings with them so that they can see what their children are working on, so that we hear from them what's really making their lives difficult, and we will shape our programming to address those areas. And then we have home visits also that we conduct with
how
families.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, Gary applauded.
So we're actually in the
Let
home.
the record show Gary applauded.
We're in the home. So if we've worked on something at school, we want to make sure it generalizes into the home environment, like, for example, toilet training. We will camp out in a family's home and make
That's
sure that
wonderful.
parents are able to do that.
And we're going to bring Ms. Tracy in the dialogue in just one moment. To me, a lot of it also, parents need information, they need support, and to have a school, and of course Ms. Tracy knows about to use the word, the spectrum of New York City special ed schools, to have somebody who knows this situation
Yeah,
is going to be
definitely.
a godsend. Talk to me a little bit about the population that Ms. Fisher addressed in terms of, she said it's a spectrum.
Yes.
Are we able, I mean, you have been through the DOE processes and know the range of things. Are we able to deal with children appropriately through the spectrum, or are we still having some issues with that? I mean, just characterize it if you
Yes, for example, like I was saying before, for the parents, it's like a little delicate topic when someone tells them, oh, your child needs an evaluation, for example, especially before 3 years old, because everybody tells the parent, oh, no, it will.
It'll
your
work
child,
itself out.
Exactly. Oh, don't worry, she doesn't have any words yet, but she will pick that up and stuff like that. And then when you start gathering more information from the parents, who is with the child and all of that, so you're trying to guide them in a way like, okay, let's just have a simple evaluation. Let's just see, what the child is. And then if it needs it, then we'll take it from there. The children that I used to work with, it was like 2.8 until they turns to 5 years old, and then so on. And sometimes it would only needed, for example, a little bit of a speech, but then some of them, they needed a one-to-one with one of the facilities that they accept, that they doing, which is wonderful. Because sometimes there's children that the autism is so high that you need that shadow, that you need to be. I was also back then a one-to-one, a para, what they call it, and you need to be the shadow of that child. You learn to the point that you know when the child is going to react.
Children who are at the other end, at the lower end of the spectrum, so to speak, are they in regular track classes? Can they survive? And then, of course, again, I'm always thinking about my brothers and sisters, parents in the Bronx. Are they getting enough information to keep these kids growing and developing as they should?
Yeah.
So I asked you about 5 questions.
Well,
I want to know.
Like I said, it's depend. Like they're trying to incorporate the classes, so it's like they do children that they need more, but at the same time, the other one will be learning as well, and especially because they divided small classes, like they do 4 children for every teacher. And let's say one child will need an occupational therapy, but that child won't need a speech, and the other one vice versa. So each of them, and within the group, they will learn from each other.
I'm going to ask each of you the question, and I'm going to start with you. What are the ultimate hopes for children with autism? And I guess it depends where in the spectrum they fall in terms of their ability to lead productive lives.
Yes.
I mean, the word normal is gone. But to lead productive lives or lives where they can feel fulfilled, and what are the chances, and then what ultimately really do they need to get there?
Well, I'm pretty sure it will be like you need to train, let's say it that way, for the society. Fortunately, not everybody understands right away that child is a little scared of balloons. Like I have children that we need to go to therapy because that child couldn't see a balloon. Like my neighbor, myself, she has to do a therapy just for the child, just for only that. So if I see the child, I see him perfect, but I don't know that he was scared of balloons. And it happens that at the moment he sees one, and right away breaks
And all of a
down.
sudden, everybody in the room, if it's at a
Thinks that
birthday
it's
party,
something-
it's like, oh my goodness, what's
What
wrong
is
with this
happening?
kid?
But not
But it's
everybody
something very
understands.
logical, and it can be traced, and it can be
Yeah,
addressed.
exactly. And it works. It works. He's able now to, even when he will go to my house, I make sure that, we will hide the balloons, but he learned, and now he's much better.
I'm going to ask you then the same question. Now, you're going to deal with children, or you do deal with children who are, on the heightened end of the autism spectrum. What do you see as goals and objectives and attainable things? And then, of course, if the children, I think you're dealing with younger children now, but they're only going to get older.
Absolutely.
And then, so talk to me about their growth and development.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all about the individual needs of each child, and really making sure that there's a curriculum that's going to address those. I think what we want for all of our students is for them to lead as independent and engaged a life as possible, and that's going to look different for each of them. I think for some of our students that may do really well with intensive instruction, the kind that we can provide because of our ratio, we may move them to a less restrictive environment that involves more typical educational instruction, more typical peers. That's a good outcome for us, is to be able to do that. I'd say the majority of our students probably will need some level of support for the rest of their lives. And so then it's about really making sure that they are ready for when education stops and they move into the world of adulthood.
Or something else.
Yep.
And then, of course, also, and this again goes back to what we were just talking about before, the parents need to know who to, well, now, okay, great,
That's
so
right.
he graduated or he's left the school, what do I do now?
And I think, unfortunately, we are not preparing families as well as we could be for that. That's why I'm so grateful. We have a director of transition and community outreach, Maura Cray. I have to shout her out because she's done such a great job of working with our families to really help them. I mean, as young as 5, we are starting to talk about adulthood with families, just to make sure, because there's getting kids ready, but there's also a ton that parents have to do to be ready for
Yes,
that.
and for other children, I mean, if they grow up and they go to school and, they graduate, and then there is an expectation that they would get trained for a job, et cetera, et cetera. In this situation, you may not be able to do it. You mentioned our ratio is so low. I want to, am I doing this right? 1 to 1?
1 to 1,
1 to 1, that's rather remarkable.
It is. But it really allows us to do the kind of instruction that those kids need. And then, as they are able to...
Oh, I'm not talking it down at all.
No, but as
I
they
wish
are...
we could do it in all our schools, I promise you.
As they are able to learn and benefit. Listen, you could take a child with autism and put them in a regular education classroom, but that's only good for them if they can really benefit from it. And many of our kids
And also
can't.
not disrupt the classroom content.
And many of our kids can't. And so we want to get them to the point where they can. And so starting with this intensive ratio is great. And then if we can fade that out, we do.
When I was over there the other day, you showed me some, I mean, we don't have them here, but maybe you could describe the kinds of things that you do. And what do you do in a classroom when children, number one, they're all different, they all have different needs, they're all at different levels, they can get disturbed by balloons or something else. So how do you handle that, and what are actually the educational and development devices that you use to get them from point A to point B?
Yeah, well, like I said, we sort of design a curriculum for each of them, so they sort of have their own series of skills that they're working on throughout the day. Many of them have very profound language deficits and difficulty understanding and using language, and so we're looking at a lot of visual supports. So we use schedules and use timers and visual systems so that if they don't understand language in the way that we can, there's a way of helping them understand what the expectation is and what's coming next. And I think that can really help with some of the challenging behavior you see with kids with autism is because they're not understanding or able to communicate in the way that you or I can.
We're showing some photos that we've pulled out of autistic kids and some of the other things going on in the school. How do you know if the child is developing? Can you I hate to be so naive about it. Can you actually see it? And what, and there's so much dialogue in education now about standards and tests and whatever. How do you measure? How do you tell?
Yeah, so we are actually, and you, when you were visiting, saw the technology that we use for students, but we also use for staff. So staff are actually collecting data on all of the skills that they're teaching. And I think that's critical because every moment with our students is valuable time. We want to be sure we're not spending it on things that aren't getting us to the outcome we're looking for. So they're actually collecting data, and we're able to talk about it, look at it together, and make assessments about how we're teaching.
All right, we're going to do the same thing in the other direction. I'm going to ask you first, and then you're going to get the same question. Let's talk about staff, how you find staff, because these have got to be the most patient, understanding, dedicated people in the world. So how do you find staff? And I assume right now we're about to start the school year. You must be pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the most incredible people I've ever worked with, and every year I'm astounded at how many more great people we add to the mix. You know, I think there are people out there who are really have found their niche in working with this population, who are interested in autism education, who are interested in using applied behavior analysis, which is the methodology that we use. And so we're very fortunate in that they find us. I think we've sort of developed a reputation as being a place where people can come and learn, and we're really a lab environment. I mean, it's a learning environment, and it's also a very collaborative environment. So if I come in as a first-year instructor, I'm still going to have responsibilities for things. I'm going to have a voice in the classroom, which I think people really like too.
You know, I'm going to lay this out there. I think the first element, the first qualification is somebody really needs to care. And they really need to care, because it's very easy to see a child who's different, a child who has problems, a child who may be acting out in a way that nobody around them can understand, to say, wait a minute, there's a human being in there, and I'm going to try to reach them. And now I'm going to do something, I mean, I don't usually do, but we talked to one of your instructors, and as I asked her a couple of questions about what she started to cry about how committed she was, and I started to cry. And now I'm getting teary-eyed again, because these are people who care for maybe the most vulnerable, the most difficult to reach children.
That's right.
And you're surrounded by those people.
Yep,
Aren't you
that's
lucky?
right.
Let's talk about finding staff, getting staff. I know you have dealt with it, you know, in all the different levels of your career. Talk about the availability of that staff and what kinds of things you might look for.
Yes, well, and special ed, they will look for different kind of evaluators, and at the same time also therapists, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, physical therapists.
So there really is an academic aspect of it.
Yes, yes.
I
Social
simplify it.
worker.
I say, oh, they just have to care. That's all.
No.
But you're saying they got to know something.
Psychologists,
Yes.
they have the psychologists as well. They have someone as well only for play therapy. So everybody has their own, you know, like as she mentioned before, their own curriculum. But I always notice that all the people that I work with, they love children. They love to take care of children as well. And they have the patience. You need 100% patience. You need it as a person himself, and then if you're going forward, you know, with all these kind of therapies, you need it as well.
For children who are, again, we're dealing with the two ends of the spectrum here. For children who are at maybe a lesser end of the spectrum, I don't know what the technical word is, you know, how do you incorporate their needs if they are going to be staying in a regular, normal, I hate to use the word, in a regular track class? How do you incorporate it so that they get the attention they need? I guess that's got to be the skill of the teacher.
When the child is progressing, you know, to where they want to take them from, you know, from point A to point B, if the child is going forward with everything that they need to, you know, based on the age as well, they will start transferring to what they call an integrated class. So they will integrate children that don't need anything at all with these children that they only need a few therapy, like it's only speech therapy or a little bit of occupational. So they will be also socialization with the children that don't need therapy at all, but then at the same time they're learning as well, and then they start moving up. If they start, what I was able to experience was that when they start the child very early, by the time that they would do the transition after 5 years old, they will be able to go straight to a regular class, to a regular school. No IEP needed at all.
One of the things that we do is what we call inclusion, where we will take, and because we have the ratio that we do, we will put a student into a less restrictive environment with one of our staff while they're still with us for a short period of time, gradually increase that time. So we're getting them ready for the transition before they actually make the change.
Ms. Tracy, talk to me about parents. Let's really get into this about parents.
Yes, very important.
And I'm really thinking about resources for parents. And again, there's a whole range of issues that any child, you know, that many of our Bronx children have. Where do they, I mean, the people at the New York City Autism Charter School are going to be fortunate because they're going to have resources.
Yes.
But where will parents find resources if the child has autism or other issues? It seems to me it's a very difficult issue.
Yes, I experienced also on my own because of my closer friends. like they didn't know how to start when her child was, for example,
Yeah, this
diagnosed
is
with
what I'm
a.
saying, yeah.
So the only thing that she was able to do was just cry, and I was like, okay,
Oh,
let's
my
start.
goodness.
Let's start over.
Now I'm going to start crying again.
No, because it's a very emotional. When you see that your child is 3, 4, 5 years old and still doesn't speak at all, no one word, it's very frustrating. So your area, your family, you need a very support system for especially let's say if your partner is working, and then but you have to work as well. What I do with my child, how I can get as much as information I can. So. Unfortunately, on her own, she couldn't find right away the information.
Right.
I will, pitch in and help. And that's when I realized that there's not a lot maybe around
Do
there.
you start with your pediatrician? Is that one
Yes,
spot?
that's the first. That's the
First,
first.
let's say
Yeah,
the
the
pediatrician,
first.
because the hospital or the doctor may
Yes.
be connected with
Yes,
social
that's how it
service
is.
resources. Okay.
That's what I suggested. I was like, you're going to speak with your pediatrician. You're going to tell her your concerns, and then they will suggest you. They will do a referral for an evaluation, because these evaluations cost a lot of money. So if you go through the Department of Education, at least you won't have to. If you don't have the money for it, you can do it through there.
Wow. Let's also have you talk about parents. Maybe you could give us an anecdote somewhere along the way of a parent who reached out, because you've been doing this for such a long time, who reached out, who came in and was like, I'm really at a loss, and then ultimately either you or somebody counseled that parent to a point where he or she can or they can care for their child.
Yeah, well, I always think of one story from East Harlem, actually, that was so poignant in my mind. I mean, a lot of times the focus is on the kids that traditionally do well, meaning they can move to a less restrictive environment. This young man is one of the more profoundly affected students that we serve, and his mom had not been able to take the family, they're from Puerto Rico, had not been able to take the family back home because of the fear of how can he sit in an airplane, he tends to flick things. If I bring him to a beach, he's going to get sand in his eyes, all those things. So we set up some programs where we practiced all the skills that he would need. We brought her in. We sort of set up our own version of an airplane with seats, and gave him a schedule of activities that would keep him occupied, and had mom learn how to redirect him.
Great story.
We taught him to wear wraparound sunglasses so that on the beach, if he did flick sand, it wouldn't get into his eyes. And they had the first successful, she sent us tons of photos from that vacation.
Oh my goodness,
and they've been
wonderful.
able to go back every
You know,
year.
that
That's
anecdote
great.
really tells a lot about what the children need and what it takes to reach them, and of course make parents feel comfortable that they can manage them. When you see a child and it seems unreachable, a child seems unreachable, you still have hope?
Always.
Wow.
Always.
Yes.
Applaud right there.
Yeah.
How do you find? And I'm very serious. It sounds like a kind of highfalutin question, but how do you find that hope? And what, even from a technical point of view, lets you know that there is a way into that child's experience or mind?
I think when you work with kids like ours and try and get staff to understand this as early on as possible, you start to look at very tiny things and appreciate very tiny steps in a direction. And when you look at the world that way, you're much more appreciative of things. And so that's really
Maybe that's why
what we
that
do.
teacher's started to get teary-eyed. Right?
We break things down into small steps and ensure that we're going to see progress, even if it's tiny progress, and we celebrate it.
You mentioned, by the way, and I just want to get into the administration of it, which is different from, of course, the administration of a traditional school. What other, you mentioned the transition specialist, what other kinds of specialists do you have in place that you might not find in your normal PS numbers?
Yeah, well, we have as I said, we use what's called ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is a very specific methodology. So we have what we call clinical supervisors. These are board-certified behavior analysts that oversee classrooms and are able really to provide a lot of, there's the didactic part of instruction when you bring new staff in, but what they really need is the in vivo, like feedback in the moment as they're working with kids, and those clinical supervisors are there to provide that.
And that's in addition to actual
Exactly,
teaching.
that's right, that's right, yeah.
let's tell the truth. Our two guests had never met before tonight. They didn't know each other. So, Ms. Tracy, for you who works in a group family daycare and works in settings with different types of children and all that, when you hear about this, I would have to assume you're real happy about
Yes,
it.
yes,
Do we have other
immediately.
resources like this, or is this really unique?
That I
in the
know
Bronx?
for the program that that she is, and know that I know of. I cannot say they do not exist, but for the group then that we have at the daycare, especially after we do we are able to do like a little evaluation, and then talk to the parents on a daily basis and to see and give them time to the child, and then now I have like where to refer the child, for example. I was like, okay, so there's a program, program is great, and because here in the Bronx it's very hard to find it.
Alicelda, Tracy, thank you so much for
You're
taking care of our
welcome.
families and our children.
Thank you so much.
And for joining us tonight. Ms. Fisher, we're going to give you the final word. Now, what my sincere hope is that parents who are watching us tonight are saying, you know what? Maybe there's somebody out there I can talk to.
Yes.
Maybe there's going to be a place for my child. Now, I know the current school year, you're filled up,
We
but
are.
you're going to be opening up more slots for
Yes.
2019.
That's right.
So I'm going to ask two questions. Number one, if parents just have a question, like I have an autistic child, I just need some advice, I need somebody to talk to, can I assume they can get to
Absolutely.
you guys?
That's
Absolutely.
And then the second thing is for people who say, you know what, I really got to get my child into this school. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen now. Talk to people about getting us more resources, and we'll do
Yes.
more of it. But what do they have to do? How do they get to you? And
Yep.
how can we really help all our children and parents?
So they can go on our website or call us. Applications for the coming school year, next year, are available starting January 1 of 2019.
But I'm interjecting. I'm sorry.
that's
It's
okay.
never too early to begin the dialogue,
That's
to
right.
know if it's the
That's
right
right.
place, to go and visit.
Yeah.
I'm just stepping right in and telling you that you're going to have some people coming to visit.
Yeah.
But I really want to make sure our families and our children have resources.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
for
I'm sorry.
sure. Yeah. So they would, we can send them or they can download an application. Application deadline is April 1st, so that's 2019. And then we do a lottery for intake, and that happens in May. But I also would love to tell parents to, they're their child's best advocate.
Yep.
They should be unafraid in that. So even you were talking earlier, even going to a pediatrician, you may get a pediatrician that says, just wait. Moms know their
Follow your
kids,
Don't wait.
parents
Yes.
know
Don't
their
wait.
kids better
Follow
than
your
anyone, so
intuition.
be a bulldog.
Be aggressive, be active, and pick up the phone and call Julie. Boy, she's going to really be happy with me. But no, we really need to do this. And so Julie Fisher from the New York City NYC Autism Charter School, Bronx, on Tinton Avenue. Thank you for what you
Oh,
do.
thank you.
Let's get resources in there because the need is right.
That's
I mean,
right.
you
Yeah.
have 20 now. You're going to have 32 next year.
Yep.
And there are
continue
many more
growing.
children
That's
who
right.
deserve the opportunity.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you for
Okay, great.
having us.
Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in our borough of the Bronx, you can send us an email at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You send us a tweet at BronxTalk, or you post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of the program. Plus, I do want to mention, if you have a question, if you have a personal situation, you can send it to us, and we will deal with it, of course, confidentially, and help you find the right resources. We're not holding back anymore. We're getting problems solved in the Bronx. That's the
Right.
way I look at it. You can check out our archives at BronxNet.org. You can find Bronx Talk by following the watch menu on the new BronxNet website. We thank our producer is Helen Greenberg. Our director is Nicholas Marrero. We thank these two people for the great work they do, and they're only a few of many. A lot of people doing great work in the
Yes,
Bronx.
that's right.
Good night. See you next week.